Okay, till we wait. Oh, so we have a question. So what's the difference between the headers cmath and math.h? Okay, there's no difference. It's just that you know that your IDE dev C++ has old version and new version, right? So in the older versions we use math.h, and in the newer versions we just use the header cmath. It serves the same purpose. So in the new IDEs you use cmath, and yeah, .h is also, we use that extension when we create our own classes or libraries. Right? I hope I have answered your question. Is any other questions? No. So how can we different data types and how they are used in the program? Right. So data types. So I think you are asking about the different data types and how they are used in the program. Well, so that question will be answered in today's presentation. We have a section on data types. So yeah, when that happens, I'll explain all about the common data types and how they are used and how we can declare variables. So that will be included. That is included in today's session. Any other questions? So if no questions, I'll be starting the session in 2 minutes. Okay, so Bob, explain out cout and cin. Alright, so okay, right, so I'll start with the session. I think in the first slide in our session today is on cout. So you'll be able to know like how cout works and cin, how to get input from the user. I'll also explain that, right? So by the way, my name is Muhammad Muhsin and I'm a second year software engineering student. Right, I'm doing eMentoring for FSCE. Okay. So before we begin, there are some things that you need to know, right? So C++. What is C++? It is the language you are using to write your code in their C++. So C++ is a programming language. Any one of you know about other programming languages that you want to share? If you like know about any other programming languages, you can just write in the chat box so that we can have a conversation. Or you can just speak to the microphone. Any other programming languages you know? Okay. So the other programming languages are like we are using for this code is C++. But examples of other programming languages are Java, and we have Visual Basic. So these are some of the other programming languages. So, and what is an IDE? IDE stands for the Integrated Development Environment. It is where you will be able to write your C++ code and compile it. An example of an IDE is dev C++. Okay, right. So we mentioned that C++ is a programming language. And for example, in the English language, you write in your textbook or your exercise book, you write everything there. So for C++ programming language, we need an IDE. The name of the IDE is dev C++. There are also other IDEs, but for this one we'll be using dev C++. And now C++ programming language. Someone might have invented it. Who invented it is Bajan Shafra. Okay. As a programmer, you should also be able to follow the ethics of programming. So there are ethics of programming from different organizations, which might be in the lecture notes, and there's a particular from the ACS, Australian Computer Society. They also have got a set of ethics upon that. Okay. Okay, right. Now let's evaluate a simple C++ program, and here you can also know about the cout statements, right? So we have a question on cout by Jinson. So cout is what print on the screen and seen where the user enter on the keyboard. Oh, so you have answered Bob's question. Yeah. So that is basically what it is. Cout is to print on the screen, and cin is you see to get the value from the user. Okay. So let's evaluate this C++ program, right? So as you can see, the first line, this is the header file, right? Every program includes one or more headers for required services such as input or output. So one of our friends asked the question regarding CMAT, right? CMAT is another header files used to do mathematical operations, right? Right. So, and the next line is using namespace std, right? So, std is standard. So, every program that uses standard services requires this directive, right? And then we have int main, right? So, this is the main function, right? You can see here the type is integer. Integer is the data type. And we are returning a 0 because 0 is an integer. So we are returning it. So return 0 means that the program will close, right? Every program needs to have a main function, and the main function is enclosed using brackets, right? So let's evaluate the cout statement. Right? Cout, we have two arrows pointing to the left, and then we have a string there. In double quotations, we write whatever you want for the user to see on the standard output. And then we end this line with ENGL. And just like when you finish a sentence in English, you end with a full stop. Every sentence in C++ needs to end with a semicolon. It is very important. If you miss the semicolon, your program will not compile. Right. So, an exercise for you. Can you tell how will the following sentence be printed? I give you some time. Please work on this question. But before that, please, I hope you have learned about the escape characters. Like we have this ENDL, right? This means end of line. So after this statement, we'll move to the next line. A shortcut way to write ENDL is this. We have a backward slash and n. So it means the same thing. And it needs to be in the quotations, the escape sequences. Right? So, yeah. I give you about 30 seconds. Can you answer this question? And write your answer in the chat box. So any answers? Okay, we have a response from Krishna, yes. So yeah, that's correct. That's how this statement will be written. Correct. So for the rest of you, like here. We have a cout, and then we are writing hello, right? So we write hello, and then you can see there's a backward slash and an n. That is a escape sequence for end line. It means to skip to the next line. So we have skipped. Now we write welcome. After writing welcome, there's another escape sequence. So we write Q here, right? And then there's another escape sequence to move to the next line, week 4. So yeah, this statement will be printed somewhat like this, right? Okay. So all of you are clear with cout statements. Is there any problems with cout? So you just need to learn the syntax. So this part cout, two arrows pointing to the left, and end with a semicolon. If you want to end the line, then you put ENDM. Right? So yeah, that's how a cout statement works. Now, errors and warnings. Errors means that the compiler could not finish its job. Okay, so whenever you are writing a code and you make a error, it makes mistake in the syntax. Error in the syntax would be like missing a semicolon or having like for integer you have an extra n, so you write INNT. So these are some of the errors. With these errors, your program will not compile. It means that the compiler could not finish its job, right? So that's when you use, that's when a compile error occurs, right? Error means that there is no executable code. Error means that you have to find and fix the problem. There is an error at compile time. So when you write your code, the error and compile your code, Dev C++ will show you a text box which will be, there will be written line numbers, and on the right will be written the errors in your code. Right? So you can track your errors and fix it. Now, warnings. Generally, warnings are means that the compiler could finish its job, but there is an executable program. Your program will start, but it may hang or worse. Warning means that you should look again, see if it is what you want. There could be an error at runtime. Okay, so one of the logic errors is like, for example, you are dividing two numbers, right? And the bottom number you are dividing by 0, right? So in your calculator, when you divide by 0, what do you get? Your calculator in your calculator is written math error, right? So if you do the same thing in C++, in Dev C++, or yeah, so division by 0, it will make your program react in a different way, some in an unfavorable way, right? So yeah, that is a warning. Your compiler will not tell that there is a warning. It will tell warnings, but it won't tell like there is a logic error. For example, if you are writing a cout statement like this is a session, right? If you misspell the word session, your compiler will not tell you that there is an error. A compiler only tells the errors, compile time errors, right? If you make the mistake with the syntax. Okay, everyone clear with errors and warnings? Okay. Now, you can answer this question. Is missing a semicolon a compile error? So I'll just skip the other part. You can just answer in yes or no. So all of you please respond. Okay, right. So we're getting answers from 3 of you. And I have to get answers from the others. Please. Great. So I think now you understand between a compile error and a runtime error, right? So if you miss a semicolon, Dev C++, the compiler will tell you, like you have missed a semicolon, right? And your program will not compile, right? And now, will this spelling error cause a compile error, right? So yeah, the sentence here should be having SINTENC. So assume the spelling of sentence here is wrong. So will this cause a compile error? The answer is no, right? Because as I told earlier, the compiler will not check your spelling. It assumes that you want to write this sentence. Okay? Right. Now let's talk on variables. So you can see the syntax for a variable definition. So the syntax is as such. First we have the data type. Then we have the name we want to give to the variable. and followed by a semicolon, right? And if you want to initialize it, we have the data type, name, and you can equate it to some value. For example, 5 because integer, put a semicolon. If it was string, we use double quotations and put the value inside. If it was character, we put single quotations and put a single character followed by semicolon. Right? Now, this is the data type, and we'll learn more about the data types in the next few slides. Our variable definition ends with a semicolon. As I mentioned earlier, every lines of code that you write should end with a semicolon. And supplying an initial value is optional, but is actually a good idea. And you should use a descriptive name that describes like what your variable is doing. Okay, right. So anyone can just give a vague idea of why is supplying an initial value a good idea? Anyone wants to try? Just any why it is a good idea to supply an initial value. Okay, right. So if you do not supply an initial value, the space in your memory will be created for that variable, right? And a random value will be associated with that. It will store there if you do not initialize your variables. So for example, if you have initialized a variable named x and you have initialized a variable named y to 5, right? And then you do y plus x. So in y you have stored 5, but you haven't stored anything in x, right? So the value that was automatically stored in x was some random value. So 5 plus x will give unpredictable result, as one of our friends here has answered. So that result won't be favorable, right? So it's a good idea to always initialize your variable. For example, if you are adding two numbers that you are going to get from the user, it's good to first initialize it to 0. It's a good programming practice. Right. Now an exercise. So you have to declare a variable that is to store the number of students in your class. So first answer the first question. What data type will you use to store the number of students in your class? So you can answer it and you write the answer in the chat box. Thank you, Krishna, for your answer. Anyone who thinks that integer is not correct? Okay, right. So the data type integer is correct. Wanna know why? So it is as such. So we want to store the number of students in our class, right? We can count the students like there are 10 students, 20 students. We cannot say like there are 20.2 students in the class. So we do not have decimal value. So we want to store students number, which is a whole number. So the best data type to use here is an integer. Right? So int. Next, what will you name the variable? Any ideas? To store the number of students. The name should be descriptive of the problem that you want to store. So again, Krishnadas has answered. Thank you for your answer. Yes, the answer is correct. That is what we can name our variable. So student number. So you can name a variable anything as long as it follows the procedure, like the rules of naming variables, right? And how will you initialize the created variable to 50? So we'll do it somewhat like this. So int student number equals 50, right? Anyone has any questions regarding this exercise? Okay, right. So let's move on to the next slide. Right. Now let's discuss the rules on choosing a variable name. So as we answered the previous question, we have student number and we put an underscore in between. That is because variable's name should not have spaces beside them, in between them, right? Instead of spaces, we can use underscores. So the first rule says variable names must start with a letter or the underscore character. And the remaining characters must be letters, numbers, or underscores, right? And the second rule, you cannot use other symbols such as the dollar sign or the percentage sign. Spaces are not permitted inside the names. You can use an underscore instead, as in can volume, right? The third rule, variable names are case sensitive. That is, can volume and can volume with a capital V are different names. For that reason, it is a good idea to use only lowercase in variable names. So, for example, we have declared a variable with a small x and a variable with capital X. So both will be interpreted differently, right? You cannot use reserved words such as double or retain as names. These words are reserved exclusively for their special C++ meanings, right? So for example, here double is our one how we declare a data type. It's one type of data type, and these words are reserved. You cannot have a variable name named double, or for example, int or cout. You cannot name your variables as such, right? So any questions on the rules of choosing a variable name? No? Okay. No. So I got a question for you. So we have initialized the value of cars to 5. How will you change the value of cars to 10 using assignment operations? So this is the int main and you have to change the value of cars to 10. How will you do it? Cars equals to 10. Again, Mr. Krishna has answered it. Yes, that's correct. So cars equals 10, right? Because on this topic, so now the value 10 will be initialized to cars. Okay, right. So now what if we want to have cars equals cars plus 10, right? Or 5. What will be the values of cars now? Assume it happens after this. So can you answer it? Now what will be the value of cars? Okay, right. Yeah, thank you for answers. Yes, 15 is correct. So how? As you can see, we after this line is executed, in this line, the value of us is changed to 10, right? And then we move on to this line. So remember, whenever there's an assignment operator with an equal sign and your operation to the right, you press to the operations that are on the right, right? So press to cos plus 5, which is 10 plus 5 equals 15, and you put the value 15 into the variable cos, right? Now, create a constant variable to store the number of chairs, assuming the number of chairs is 10. Assuming there are 10 chairs, so create a constant variable to store the number of chairs. And assuming that the number of chairs is 10, how will you create a constant variable to store 10 chairs? To store the value 10. So answer please. Okay, so we got our solution again established. Right. So yeah. Bob and Sanjini, like you have assigned the value 10 to shared number. Like, but the question says to create a constant variable to show the number of shares, right? So to do that, this is constant variable, right? So first of all, we need to use the constant keyword, which is const, right? Then the data type to show the number of shares. Number of shares will be a whole number, so okay, right? Then a descriptive name. For all questions, use the name in capital. So, chair number and equals to 10. Good job to Mr. Krishna for getting it right. Yeah. So, as you read the question, there's a few. It says constant variable. You have to create a variable, right? So, you create a constant variable and you initialize it to 10. So, the only difference is here the keyword const will be added before the data type and the name will be full character, right? And it should always be initialized to a value. Any questions regarding constants? All good? Right. Now, as someone asked before starting today's session about the data types, right? So first look at integer. So can anyone on the microphone like explain about an integer? Anyone wants to try? Use the microphone, you can just press unmute yourself and you can just start speaking. Okay, right. So I guess no one wants to speak, right? So yeah, the data types. The integer data type is used to store whole numbers, right? Whole numbers such as from 1 to a million probably. For example, 1 to 100, you want to store any numbers, 1 to 200, 300. So you can just store it in integer, right? And float. Float is for floating point numbers, which simply means the decimal numbers, right? So, for example, you want to store the height of a person. You'll have the height will be like 1.7 meters, right? So you can store 1.7 in float. And the same thing applies to double. The difference between float and double is the amount of numbers you can store, right? The length of the number. So in a double, you can store longer bits of numbers, and in float, a bit less, right? So that's the advantage of a double and of a float, that you can store big numbers. So float also has an advantage, like you are saving memory space. So that's the advantage of a float. You use float, right? Now Boolean. Boolean data types can only store two values. Does anyone know what are those two values? Yes, again correct, Krishna. Yeah. So those two values are true and false. And yes, also 0 and 1. Yeah, you can say like 0 and 1 for true and false. Right. But when writing code in Dev C++, it initialize the Boolean variables to true and false. Right. So yeah, only two values. Either it can be true or false. Right. And what about string? What does a string store? Great. So now answers right. So okay, a string in single quote. Are you sure? So yeah, a string we store like a word or a group of words. For example, world. So Krishna, what you are saying is for single quotes, and that example is for characters. Now, there is a difference between string and characters. In string, we can store like a word or two words for a sentence, right? And then we have another very important data type, which is character. And in this, the difference between character and string is that in character, we use single quotes, right? Yeah. And we can only store a single character. In a string, you can store sentences, words, but in a character, you can store only a single character and in single quotes, right? So, Krishna, I hope you understand now the difference between a string and character, right? All right. Okay. So we have reached the end of the slides. Now you can ask any questions that you have. And if I'm able to answer it, I'll answer it. It's just a quick question like, how are you finding CS111 so far? Is it good? Is it okay? Is it not good? Challenging? Yes. Okay. And do you think like these e-mentoring sessions are effective? Okay, right. Okay, right. Thank you. So, you have any questions that you might, any clarifications? So, are we going to have solution for labs? I'm not sure. Like when I was doing it face to face, and we used to do the labs in the labs, right? So I don't think so that you will be getting the solution. But yeah, like this is a programming. The labs focus on programming. So yeah, if your program works, then that means like the solution is correct, right? Yeah. So that's how you can check the solutions. And Ranjini, like will this presentation be emailed to us? So these presentations are all recorded, and like from the place you access, like you click on join session, right? Below that there will be a list of sessions, right? All are stored. Like it will be updated by tomorrow, right? So all this presentation will be stored there in the video file, and you can check the date, like Friday 10 a.m. that this session started, and you can watch it again. If you want the PowerPoint slide, like I've taken all the resources from the lecture notes, and you can read the lecture notes. If you really want the PowerPoint slide, you can tell me, I can email you. But if you want to just watch the video, you can do it through the eMentoring blog in your Moodle. I've answered your question. Any other question?